absolutely. But hey, I think all podcasters enjoy talking. So,
That's pretty much your job requirement, isn't it?
well, it was so funny. I am generally sort of introverted. I
Right.
kind of keep to myself. I'm sort of, but
Right.
so you have all of these like shields for I don't want to talk to anyone. I mean, that's been kind of the nice thing about masks. If you are an
Right.
introvert, the mask kind of gives you a
Oh,
way
yeah.
out of having that
Yeah, for
conversation.
sure.
And no, podcasters will find a way. Always.
Right. Right. Family or somebody, a group of people, a small group of people is very energizing to me, especially if we're having great conversation.
Well, yeah, so I think maybe that's the key because if there's a good conversation happening, it doesn't, I'm good. It's sort of like
Right.
I'm just the awkward girl who was at the party, like sitting in the couch with her drink, being like, "Will
Right.
someone please talk to me?"
Which is that there's a common criticism
I think you just
of,
cut out. So,
oh,
I'll wait
well, the important
patiently.
thing is that you can hear. So, can
Yeah,
you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay.
I can hear you now. Can you hear me? All
Okay.
right, good.
Well, that's part we'll edit out. So,
So you think you could kind of use that beginning and we can say, hey, and now weeks have gone
yeah.
by.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Do you think anybody will notice that it's different?
I mean, I like my sound is the same. I don't know if I mean, we could try. I mean, there's a thing called editing.
Right.
So
We may have to do a little bit of that creative editing to get it.
welcome to Education is Painful, the podcast where you will learn. This is a Toro Strategic Production, part of the Engine Media Group, in association with Hearst Digital Media. Welcome again to Education is Painful. I have a guest today that I've really been looking forward to. We missed a couple of chances to try to make this happen, but I've really been looking forward to having this conversation. It is Rachel Wilkerson, who's the
yes,
host of the
hi.
Lifemancy Podcast. Yes. You're also a freelance writer, including an audio drama set in the Vampire the Masquerade universe. And
Yes.
correct me if I'm
Yes.
wrong, but the name is Port Saga, right?
Vampire the Masquerade, Port Saga. I have just taken the big plunge into audio drama and I love it. So yeah.
And this is like a full cast. Uh, this isn't like just you reading some stuff off a page. This is a full cast, high drama,
No.
dramatized thing, right?
Yes, no, this is full. We had almost 20 people, and we have actors from all walks of life, from amateur to professional union actors involved in it, and they all have kind of a connection to gaming or nerdy stuff or
Right.
even vampires in specific, but it was really my attempt to say, hey, we all really get a kick out of vampires, so
Right.
let's do this thing, and then and also just open up the door for a real diverse array of people and professional levels and talent sometimes.
Cool.
I mean that with love. I do.
Right. Right.
But yeah.
Well, and I listened to a couple of the trailers, including the otherwise unpublished one at the end of the latest Lifemancy podcast, and I have to say
Yes.
the production value, and I mean obviously it's just a trailer, so I haven't heard the whole thing, but it sounded good. I mean it was really, it sounded slick and professional and interesting. Um, So, I mean,
Yeah, no,
if you're interested in this, you should definitely check out the Lifemancy podcast, if only so you can get the special preview.
Well, I had to give something to my own, Lifemancy listeners. They've been with me now for 2 years. And so I was like, all right, here's your inside scoop. Now, understandably, the Lifemancy crowd, they are more into witches and witchcraft and wizards and magic and that sort of side of it. But I'm like, you guys can get into vampires a little bit. I mean, it's not a big leap.
Yeah, well, as I recall, it's been a while, but as I recall, there's a fair amount of magic. It's not so much ritual magic, but there's a fair amount of magic involved in the vampire world of the Masquerade, right?
Yes, well, yes, there's an entire so Vampire the Masquerade is broken up into clans. So you have these clans that have certain special abilities and special missions and special values. It's this idea of like there are artists and these are your Anne Rice vampires. But then you have the Tremere, and the Tremere are and they're all going to get mad at me if they hear this, your Harry Potter fans. So all of the Tremere are, high ceremonial magicians doing magic. So I mean, there's some crossover. They're gonna get so mad that I said Harry Potter. I don't care.
Well, I mean, it's kind of like the cryptocurrency crowd. They're all different. They all have their own special focus, and they all think they're the coolest and the most important.
Yes, and they all take themselves way too seriously. So.
Right. So yeah,
I mean, we all take ourselves way too seriously. So
sure. I played Werewolf Apocalypse.
I know Werewolf Apocalypse. Yeah, I know Werewolf the Apocalypse. What did you play? What do you remember your character?
I played a couple of different things at different times. One was my favorite one by far. That was the most, just by far and away the most fun. Was actually a weird coyote, a Nuisha.
Oh, yeah.
That was because you could do it. You could basically do anything, and you would probably get smacked around a lot, and you just kind of had to laugh it off, which was for whatever reason that I just thought that was tremendously fun to constantly be playing practical jokes on everybody.
I played a werecrow or a were-raven, I suppose you would call it. And I also played a Geta Fenris. Played a big Viking Geta Fenris.
Yeah, that's fun. It's just you definitely
everyone who's listening to your podcast is like, what the shit are they talking about?
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. I think there's probably more people that would be World of Darkness aware than you might think. But well, let me ask you a couple questions, and these are the how I guess you have to the have to questions. And so we won't spend just a ton of time on them, but I think it's important. I think anybody who reads any of your social media profiles or your podcast profile would know that you're kind of have the tagline of that your life didn't quite go according to plan. And
that's so tactful of you.
So
didn't quite go as planned.
Yeah. So and I don't want to dig into anything that you don't want to share, of course, but what does that mean? How does that play out in Rachel world?
Well, there's a major component of that I did not really realize until I was in my mid to late 30s, but I had been walking around with undiagnosed depression for pretty much my entire life. And so I had a lot of trouble in my teenage years and in my 20s, particularly my 20s. My 20s was just a mess. And I was having so much difficulty trying to do things that everybody else was doing. There were sort of two things going on. There was sort of depression, and there's this like potential ADD thing happening. And ADD is so underdiagnosed in women because of culture, socialization, and you don't have necessarily that hyperactive side. But it is this idea that you have difficulty focusing, add depression to that, add anxiety to that. And as a teenager, as a 16, 17-year-old, like everybody just wants to say, oh, she's just going through puberty. She, this is what being a teenager is. And so it was a lot of years of me feeling like I was not getting something everybody else was, or that there was something particularly wrong with me, or there was some sort of difficulty. And it was many, many, many years before I kind of even accepted, because even when I sort of was looking at these things and said, I think there is actually something here, that this is not just circumstance, this is not just age, this is not just growing up. It was difficult for me to sort of accept that this might actually be a chemical imbalance, like something that is going to forever be there if you're not medicated for it. So I was going on and off medication all the time. I would get better, of course. And then I think, okay, everything's fine now. And then, throw out the pill bottle, and then suddenly I'm, in a mess again. So I did a lot of that for a very long time, which I personally feel kind of set my life back a decade. So I like to think of myself as a very young looking 44-year-old, but I am 44. And, but I still feel like I'm 30, because that whole 20s was just gone. I didn't finish college until I was in my 30s. I didn't really even kind of get out on my own. I went through a marriage during that time, found a second one, so there was a lot of things that happened that I feel like, and maybe this is something that I've made up in my head, but I feel like most people kind of get settled in their 30s. Like where I am now, most people got to 10 years ago. And so I constantly feel like I am behind the 8 ball all the time, or I'm always trying to play catch up, or there is something that I have somehow missed, and that, heaps of regret weighing on me, sort of like, oh, if I had only done this, if I had only known it sooner. So one of the things that I have learned to kind of accept in this is just kind of accept where you are, accept that you are, there is no race, there is no particular timetable. It is only when you get to the thing that you have to get to. And then in my late 30s, I looked around and I just did not have really a whole lot going for me. I hadn't found a career path I wanted to. I was writing for an education company, and it was good, but I had always said I was going to write a book by the time I was 25. Well, I can't even tell you what I was doing at 25. Like I was, there was just a mess. And so this idea that I was going to somehow be a published author, and, and all of these dreams that I was going to be a published author, and then I was going to be a professor, and then I was going to be a concert pianist. And, I had all of these, it was the list of things that you make when you're 16, and you say, here is all of the amazing stuff I'm going to do. And then I was, 36, 7, 8, having accomplished none of it. In some of it, you can kind of say, like, it's the kid saying, I want to be an astronaut when I grow up. And, you kind of have to let that go. But when I sort of settled into this, again, 37, 38-year-old life, I realized, okay, I'm a writer for an education company. I am living in an apartment. I can't afford a house. I can't do some of these things that most people had done. And when I was talking to my husband, we decided to try to have kids. And I was like, okay, well, my life didn't work out, so let me have a child and live vicariously through them, because that's such an awesome idea, right? Yeah, that's particularly the reason why you want to be a mom. And so we went ahead and tried to do that, and we're having a lot of trouble. And so I started going to the fertility clinics, and then I was in front of a doctor who said, no, this is not happening for you. I was sort of, that this was, I guess they call it child-free, not by choice.
Right.
And and there was nothing I could do. There was he wasn't even going to try to do in vitro or anything. Like, it was just, he was like, nope.
Not gonna happen.
Here is adoption. Yeah, here's adoption, or here is a surrogate that you would have to do. And again, my husband is an actor and I'm a writer. It is not like we have the money for surrogates or even adoption, really.
Mm-hmm.
And so my husband was devastated. And I was too. I mean, I think that mine came from a couple of different places. Like, he really wanted to have this child. He really wanted to be a dad. And so a lot of my own grief and guilt came from not being able to give that to him, of this idea of, again, being a woman in this society. It is sort of like, you're supposed to be a mom. Go be a mom. And I was like, well, that's not going to happen. And so I was really having a lot of trouble figuring out how I would contribute to the world. Because as far as I just felt like I was somebody who consumed everything else, that I wasn't really giving anything back to anybody. So it was... Well, and so I did. I ended up having I went through a whole new depression streak, of course, and had a really difficult time, made lots of bad decisions. Some of them were fun, but they were still terrible. And it was this idea of like, okay, well, here I am now, this 40-year-old woman. My marriage is on the rocks. The writing job I had, the contract had ended, and because of corporations, it was a small company. The company said, we can't renew your contract. So I was 40. I had a marriage on the rocks. I was effectively unemployed, and didn't really have anything to hold on to, and didn't have really any sort of personal purpose for myself, because at that point I was like, okay, everything that I ever tried to do, I failed at. Hence, I am a failure. Hence, I can't try to do anything else. I might as well just wait to die. And that is not a great place to be. Of course, obviously. But I just, and it was in that sort of bottom of that well or pit or hole or whatever you want to call it, that is when I started turning to witchcraft. And everybody's like, what? I was like, yes. Okay. So I had an interest in the occult and divination and witchcraft and since I was, a kid. But at that point, at, again, 40, 41, 42, I looked around and I said, I've got nothing to lose. Everything that I tried to do that was conventional wisdom, everything that I tried to do that society said that you were supposed to do, I sucked at so hard, And so I was like, what does it matter? If everybody's going to look at me like I'm a freak because I'm a lady who can't have children, or because I'm a 40-year-old who exists like a 30-year-old, like, whatever it is, I was just like, I might as well be weird, because why not? And so I did. I got out. Yeah. I mean, I got out tarot cards. I got out spells. I got out, crystals. It's like whatever it was. And I think part of it was I needed to have something to do. And the other was because I was staring at this future, because there is something very, I don't know how to explain it. There's a position of having so much choice, you have no choice.
Mm-hmm.
it's this weird thing. Like I was sitting here saying, I have this future where I could literally do anything that I wanted. But by being able to do literally anything I wanted, I had no idea what I wanted to do. It was just sort of like you're staring into this unknown future, and it's like, well, do I like this? Do I go back to school? Do I try to get this job? Do I try, and it was just sort of casting out in the darkness.
The prison
and
is
so
being free from all constraints.
Yeah,
sort of the
but it was also
being free from all constraints.
Yeah, it was a different sort of paralysis. And so I was doing tarot cards and keeping a magic spell book and doing all of these things. And it was in participating in that and doing it and sort of reconnecting to that, I would call it a childhood hobby. I was never initiated into like an order or a coven or a practice or anything like that. I was just a solitary witch hanging out in a cornfield, doing weird shit. So, as a kid. So I was like, well, I could go back and do it. I'll just do it in Houston instead. So, but I realized that when I started doing this, that is when I got the idea for the podcast, for Lifemancy. And the way that you tactfully put the tagline, it is, my life was a dumpster fire, so I turned to witchcraft. So, yes, because my life was a dumpster fire, like for real. So
yeah, okay. So here we are, with Rachel Wilkerson, the witch.
Yeah, kind of.
So,
witch adjacent, well, actually, I did call myself an omni witch the other day.
Omni witch?
An omni witch, because they were like, what kind of witch? Well, it's like, what kind of witch are you? And I'm just sort of like, well, what sounds interesting today? Like,
yeah, what am I interested in today? I thought of, I came across the term metamagical researcher recently, and I thought I could go for that. That sounds interesting.
That's kind of, I can see that's kind of what I'm doing too.
Yeah. One of the things, and so I'm gonna kind of skip ahead so a little bit, because there's a lot of stuff that we have, maybe bounced some ideas around, and as is common with people who listen to podcasts, I feel like I know you probably better than I actually do. But one of the things that struck me about your podcast, especially, and just talking to you offline a couple of times, is that you're not like easily, you don't take it so seriously that if somebody says, well, I don't really know if I believe in that, or I kind of think this maybe but not this, that you're kind of okay with that.
Oh yeah, I'm okay with I'm okay with most things. Like, it pretty much, if it is not hurting somebody else, do it to it.
Yeah.
Whether that is being a skeptic or whether that is being a believer, right. And given any particular day of the week, I will believe something and not believe something. Like, it just sort of depends. In fact, I'm going to interject here. I was reading something the other day. I want to say it was Mark Manson. I don't know if you've ever heard of Mark Manson, but love reading his stuff. I think he put out an article, and he was talking about wisdom and how wisdom came from being able to hold multiple points of view in your mind at the same time. Yep. And so, and that's sort of how I feel like it was so funny. I was talking about going to this podcast convention, and I met a woman who had a podcast, and I said, oh, what's your podcast? And she told me it was for evangelical Christians. And I said, oh, can we still be friends? And I told her what I was doing. Yeah. And she's like, yeah, we can still be friends. And so we ended up talking, for an hour or so that afternoon. And I have had other Christian evangelicals come up to me and say, I really like you. I'm sorry you're going to hell, but I'm like, that's okay. That's all right.
Yeah, you gotta love those fundies.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's probably half my family too somewhere. Anyway,
my mom and dad, for sure.
yeah. So I'm sort of okay with whatever anyone believes, because I also have a sense that we don't really know the answers to things yet. And so why discount belief until we have a fact?
Yep.
And so the whole point of my podcast, which shameless plug here, is bringing that science and spirituality together.
Right.
Because I do believe that there are facts at the point at which a physicist figures something out, at the point at which, a doctor figures something out and scientists figure things out. Like, okay, but there is this imaginative side, even if you're a skeptic, and even if you don't believe and you think all of it's a hooey, and there is a part of it that engages your creativity and engages your imagination, that as you sort of decide how you're going to conjure this thing in the world that you want, you're problem solving. And so even if you want to call it, I'm lighting candles, or I am putting out crystals, or, whatever it is, you are still guiding your thought to a solution. And your mind, whether it's magic or not, is going to try to give you an answer to that question.
So one of the thoughts I've been thinking about a lot recently is this common criticism of self-help coaches, motivational speakers, as well as horoscopes and tarot readings and various scryings and prophecies, is that the things that they say are very vague and open to interpretation. And I would say this applies to a lot of forms of divination, whether it's spiritual or supernatural or psychological tests, anthropology dissertations, even stock pickers and Bitcoin traders. But my counter to that is that isn't that the point? Is to provide this sort of archetypal statement of a problem and response that you can apply across many different situations at many different times. But what are your thoughts on that? Does that even make sense? Did I just ramble?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Awesome.
There are three things that I like to bring up whenever this happens. So what you're talking about is called the Barnum effect. And the Barnum effect is named after P.T. Barnum.
Yep.
And it is this idea that if you say, I believe there's a psychological study where a professor wrote the same horoscope for all of the students and said, if this applies to you, raise your hand, and everybody raised their hand. So, and so what they're saying is that is the effect of people will see themselves in anything that they want to see themselves in. And I think partially that is true. I think but I think that is because people are looking for information about themselves, an answer to uncertainty, a validation for who they are and what they believe. And so I think there is a kind of a give and take in there. And I believe that happens. And sometimes, like that there is, things are vague enough that you can kind of find something that equates to you. I have had personal experiences that are far, far, far more specific and weird and scary.
Right.
So I get a little bit more into the belief side of it, but I can completely understand. Like, I don't necessarily know that Jupiter is going to make me have a great day tomorrow. Like, I'm not necessarily saying the energy is wafting down from Jupiter or something like that, but I do think that there is something about cycles.
Right.
And like human cycles and the cycles of civilization and the cycles of time. And you got to think that if humans have been staring at the stars for 4,000 years, yes, 4,000 years, it's like astrology came from
If not
Babylonians and Sumerians.
Right.
Yeah. Like that when you have a repository of 6,000 years of and not just woo-woos looking at it. Like, pretty much if you go before the 19th century, every scientist was an astrologist too.
An astrologer and an alchemist.
So, and an alchemist and a numerologist, right? Pythagoras was a numerologist. So you had these great minds asking these philosophical questions and using aspects that we think are nutty today, or woo-woo, or not real. But when you think about the fact, I think Newton was a numerologist. So there are aspects, I believe, and we were just talking about Myers-Briggs or Enneagrams. How is that not a horoscope too? Yet people think, well, I took a test, and if I took a test, this is what it tells me. And I was like, no, that is sort of
the
aggregate information of human types and inclinations. And how is that any different than people talking about what zodiac sign you are for 6,000 years? Oh, yeah. Well, I'm sure I'm wearing different clothes and my hair might be different. So, like, there's clearly going to be and time has now passed. And I think we could just be really upfront and honest and saying, so tech issues happened and it took a couple of weeks for us to get back again. But now we're here.
Yeah.
And so now we get to talk about what it's like 3 weeks later.
Yeah. In the meantime, though, I mean, I keep trying to say Port Arthur.
Port Saga. Yeah, you just have to remember it's a drama, so it's a saga. So it's to get all of that oomph in there. It's coming out in less than 12 hours at this point.
Yeah.
I am 10 hours away from the first episode,
and
I'm freaking out. I'm freaking out.
Like it's recorded, right? So it's ready.
Oh yeah, it's recorded, it's done, it's mixed, it's ready to go. I just got to put it out. But I will be honest in saying I am still working on episode 2.
Right.
So I'm supposed to be dropping these every week, and it's like, perhaps you should edit a little faster, Rachel.
Yeah, I know the feeling. Because I've got to do, before I go on vacation, I've got to do the next episode of this, and then this one. Well, no, two more that need to be edited, plus this one, which is going to be completely different editing challenge than any other, because I've never had such a crazy time.
Where it's like 2 different backdrops and 2 different scenarios. You should have the little those wavy lines and then we teleported into the future.
Time passes and
yeah.
So a couple of things have happened in the meantime. You have a new episode of your podcast that has dropped in the meantime.
Yes.
Which was really interesting.
Are you talking about the shadow work one?
The shadow work one, yes. So
yeah.
First of all, that doesn't mean anything like what I thought it meant.
Okay, because were you thinking boxing?
That's a good. Yeah, I should go with that. That sounds better. Because I was coming from playing role playing games and.
Oh yeah.
Something I was thinking it was something a little darker than what it actually is. But yeah, that was actually pretty interesting.
No, good. Well, have you ever played Shadowrun?
Yes, although it's been a long time ago. That was a fun, interesting kind of.
Yeah. Well, I was very. I like the sci-fi side of things, and that had a very cyberpunk feel to it. Shadowrun did, and I heard just today that they are turning Blade Runner into an RPG now too. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah, that should be interesting. Speaking of my immensely nerdy reading habits, was there a Wheel of Time trailer?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, there was a Wheel of Time trailer drop too.
Yeah.
So yeah, you are totally nerdy. You just need to embrace this part of yourself.
That book series, and when I say a series of books, because I am recording this part, when I say a series of books, these are volumes. Like these are massive Like just a single book is a huge book. And that series of books, first of all, it spans, just in my lifetime, it spans a 20-year or more time frame. And then, of me discovering it and reading it and waiting for the next book and then waiting for a long time. And then, Jordan has the audacity to die in the middle of writing the books and has to get finished.
No spoilers. Spoiler alert.
Well, fortunately, he was a good note taker and had a lot of stuff was already pretty well mapped out. But so it wasn't like it wasn't quite as much of a punt as it could have been. But
yeah,
still, like seeing the production value and some of, not all of the cast because I don't know them, but some of the cast choices were both interesting and really exciting. Like, especially because I was talking to somebody about this earlier today. This was a book that came out in the 80s, and if I'm not badly mistaken, and features this really, really strong, female organization that's basically running the whole world. And, now with,
imagine.
I know. I mean, it's
imagine if that could be
not
real.
all good, but it was, yeah. I mean, thinking about, putting that out there today, in the current climate of everything. I mean, I think it's long overdue in my opinion. I'm really looking forward to that. I hope it's as good as I think it is.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, no, shadow work is about just getting in touch with your own dark side.
Right.
So.
Right.
And particularly, I should say Happy Mabon then. Today is Mabon.
Okay.
Which is
it's not in May.
It's not in May. No, Mabon is about it's a Welsh god of sun god. So Mabon is a Welsh sun god. And right now, right this minute, is the autumnal equinox. It is the day that on the equator, the day is equal to the night.
Yep.
And it is the second to last holiday on the wheel of the year. Halloween being the last day because it's the end of harvest season. And so now we're going into this time period where night is growing. And Mabon has a similar story to Persephone. I don't know if you know the Greek myth Persephone. Right. It was this idea that when she got to be away from Hades and out of Hades' realm, that's when spring is and things grow and the world is beautiful. But then she has to spend 6 months of the year with Hades in the darkness. Mabon has a similar story in that Mabon was whisked away and kidnapped just after he was born and kept in a dark dungeon.
Right.
And then King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table come and rescue him so he can kill the wild boar for them.
Right. Because he spent all that time wild boar killing while he was trapped in a...
Yes. He's supposedly this amazing hunter who has never hunted anything in his existence because he has been in a dark dungeon. Yeah. But he's a god, so, stuff and things.
little hand wavy stuff there.
Yeah, we're gonna hand wave that. So he has magical hunting powers, and so when he is released from the dungeon, that is their like, and now we are in spring and summer, but now it's an arbitrary thing that got put on there in the 1970s. Like, this is not even like a legit thing from the ancient Celts. This is somebody in the 1970s. Well, the Wiccans in the 1970s. Love me some Wiccans. Yeah. No judgment there. Right. But the Wiccans in the 1970s said, let's just call this Mabon instead of calling it the autumnal equinox. And I was like, all right, cool. So happy Mabon.
happy Mabon and appropriate felicitations.
Yeah.
So that actually brings up an interesting thought there. How many of the things, okay, so coming from as somebody who like reads a lot of things and researches a lot of things, and after a while you start to see that a lot of the things that people celebrate and believe in and ritualize are somewhere along the way somebody just sort of arbitrarily said this is what we're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And how much of that is, or maybe the question is, how do you think about that? Is that something that, does that make it less or does that make it more in your mind?
I think that anything that we celebrate or any holiday that we create, whether it's Mabon or Halloween or Christmas, there is some sort of root somewhere back in the annals of human history. There is some kernel of something. But I sort of feel like the modern holidays, I mean, what was it? Valentine's Day is a greeting card holiday. Like that was, what was another one too? I remember that there was also a holiday, or like when we changed the time, you know how you spring forward or fall back,
right,
when you change the clocks, like the day that you fall back was changed because sometime in the 1940s, the candy salesman realized that if you push that date back, they sold more candy.
Oh,
like, yeah, I will have to find that. I found that story for one of my episodes, and I will have to go back and refind it. But there are so many of these like capitalistic decisions,
right,
arbitrary decisions in the 20th century. These things. So when you think about, I'm celebrating Christmas, and Christmas is about Jesus, and it is about Santa, and it is about this tree, and
right,
it is this combination of 3 different ancient cultures coming together in a day, and then you have things like Mabon, which was created in the 1970s, or so I don't have a problem with any of that though. Like anything that brings people together or anything that allows people to just be grateful for the day or to enjoy their day or to look forward to something or to give meaning to something. Like, I don't care what you celebrate. I don't. You know, it was, what's the one from Seinfeld?
Oh, yeah. I can't think of it.
What was that? Festivus for the rest of us or something?
Yeah, Festivus. That was it. Completely made up. Well, that's funny because my mom just arbitrarily decides to do family traditions. So like why are we doing this? It's a tradition. Like, no, it's not. She said, it is now.
It is now.
Okay, well,
that's how they get made. Yeah, I mean anything, like, who knows? Who knows if 200 years from now suddenly Mabon is going to be a thing,
right?
And they're going to say, well, they used to do this in the 20th century, and this is now a tradition that everybody really enjoys. And we're sitting there being like, what the hell is Mabon? We don't even know what it is. Right. Like, so.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and then that's the thing. But I guess that kind of circles back around to one of the other things that I wanted to talk about.
Oh, good.
I'm pretty good at making those little conversational turns when I want to.
Good, because I am really good at running down rabbit holes. So.
Well, no. So the thing is, how I think, coming from a sort of a meta anthropological perspective, I think that a lot of these things have to do with groups of people believing in things. Maybe that's not even right.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not even the belief in the derogatory sense that people believe in things now, but more that people put thought and time and effort into things. So, if you are in a group of people, or even just by yourself, and Mabon is the thing that you celebrate, and you put thought and effort into that thing, then whether it was something that somebody created in the 70s or something that you created last week, if you and ideally, some people that would be a group are all putting, thought and effort and will towards this, then it becomes as real as the thought and effort and will that you put towards it. And so I can almost see you saying that is exactly what magic is. But
that is exactly what magic is.
But I think where like the less magical people of the world are making a big mistake is failing to think that all this other stuff that we put thought and effort and will towards is not magical. Like just because there's, just because it doesn't have spirits and woo-woo associated with it doesn't mean that the fact that you're working your will towards something that has force in the world and it matters and
absolutely
and real life.
Yes, you don't. There's no. You don't need to light candles and go out and dance naked in the woods like this.
Fun.
None of that is fun. Not necessary though. I mean, like every time, people talk about goal setting. People talk about coming up with project plans and strategies, and that all of these things, whether it's magic or a planner,
right?
It's all about how do you focus your attention and will to create the outcome that you want. Now, I do believe that we use magic from being wee young children, and it is so integrated into our culture that we don't even look at it as magic. I saw this great thing about like birthdays. Why are you blowing out all the candles and making a wish?
Right.
That's magic, right? I saw another one. It's called a mirror spell. A mirror spell is when you essentially put up this like ward that's like any darkness or any evil that somebody wants to direct at you bounces back at them. That's the mirror aspect. It gets reflected. But there was that thing. Oh gosh, I'm trying to remember it now. Like anything, I'm rubber, you are glue.
Right.
Anything you say bounces off to me and sticks to you. That's a mirror spell.
Right.
And sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me.
Right.
That's a warding spell. So there are these things that we're taught, even as young children, that help us have a good attitude or have a better understanding or to have greater confidence and self-assuredness in the face of difficult situations. And so whether it is a magical ritual or rather it's saying, I'm rubber and you're glue.
Right.
All of these things prepare us for facing a challenging time. And I even think that's the case that even if you're just trying to reach a goal in your life, or if you're just trying to attain something for yourself, I mean, education is painful. Education is painful. Welcome.
Yeah. And yeah, it often is. And how painful it is depends on how quickly and how early you learn the lessons, in my experience.
Yeah, and it's also about adapting to the circumstance that you're in. And right. So whatever is going to help you adapt, like I don't have a problem with anybody doing anything that helps them be a better person. If that's magic, wonderful.
Right.
If that's a religious practice, great. If it's metaphysical, spiritual woo-woo, great.
Right.
If it is math, happy for you.
Right.
It's sort of just, it's like, what is going to help you be the best person that you want to be? What is going to get you focused on the goal that you want to achieve? And what's really just going to open you up to the experiences that life has to offer? Right. And, whatever version that is, I'm down with.
Yeah. There's I could talk about this stuff for hours. But in the interest of trying to keep things interesting for other people besides the two of us.
What? No one wants to sit around and listen to us talk about nerdy shit? Really? Aw.
Maybe there's more than we think. Maybe two of the, and this is sort of a. I mean, I'm kind of building on some other anthropological resources, as well as some, I guess, more traditional, like European magical things, readings. But it seems to me that the two big eyes of magic are intuition and intention. Would you add or say, no, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard? Or what would your take on that be? How do those two things relate? What are they good for?
Well, so you say the two big I's are intuition and intention. I might add a third I, which would also be intellect.
Okay. Yeah, I like that.
I think that could be in there too, because there's definitely a learning component and self-study,
right,
even if you want to call it that. There is this, you have to be able to critically think in a lot of ways. But really, yeah, no, I agree with the assessment there that everything comes down to intuition and intention, and that intention can be as much as the thing that you want to achieve, as it can also be your intention of goodwill versus not as goodwill too. Like, how do you intend to do this thing? What intention are you living in? Are you wanting to be a good person that wants to do good things for others and help serve others? Or are you somebody who is in it for themselves? And, why are you doing the things that you're doing, and investigating where that comes from too. Right. But I think that if you took, I just feel like, so there is this idea that there is a spirit in everything. Mm-hmm. Like everything has a spirit there. And that is what kind of, some people believe that, some people don't. Some people believe a rock is a rock. Some people believe that rock has a rock spirit.
Right.
And so the two ways that magic kind of differ is there are magical traditions that are really based on the will of the individual. Mm-hmm. And that is sort of where I lean. I lean less in, not that things don't have energy. Like, I believe everything has a form of energy or it would not exist, but I don't know that there are necessarily rock spirits,
right?
Like sentient spirits that exist in that. That is a little bit more pagan than I am, but that has a different kind of take on magic as far as intention and your intuition, because you are actually relating to another entity of a sort. Mm-hmm. So that becomes about less the individual, which is a fourth eye in our talk, but that actually talks more about community and relationships and working in balance with the world around you. And so that's a little bit different, but if you take those two kind of big, broad ideas, that is essentially the entire magical community.
Yeah, I would buy that. Yeah, I would buy that to some extent, because even some of the cultural groups that are almost gone now, that are where they have a tradition of. They have a strong tradition of magic, but it's always negative, and they have very little positive anything really. But even then, there's always will. It's always either me projecting something or somebody projecting something onto me. There's always mm-hmm. Some intuitive understanding. But there's that working of the will versus harmony with the world around you. I was always of I always kind of thought that where I would fall out would be very much independent and, will working. This is I'm going to do this because I'm. But it turns out that's not who I am at all. I really think, I would agree that I don't think there's like each individual rock has its own spirit, but, from, I guess, coming from sort of a Zen, Buddhist nature, that everything has a nature, you could say it's a spirit, but it is the way it is. If you drop the
What's
rock,
the concept of chi too? It's that
right.
It's the essence of energy. Yeah.
Yeah. If you drop the rock, it's going to fall because that's its nature to do. And we can dress that up with fancy terms like gravity, but the fact remains that matter of certain types attracts matter of other certain types, and that's the way that they work. And working within that, if you're going to do things, it's much easier to work within that framework of these things have a certain nature that is attractive or repulsive or whatever.
It's also good to know about people.
Right.
It's like, don't expect people to act outside their nature.
Right.
You can do what you can, but if you find the harmony to work with everything around you, using the nature that it is, that's going to make life a lot easier for you.
Yeah, right. Which is not necessarily to say that, if somebody is, is like mildly abusive or something, somebody who takes advantage of people, that doesn't necessarily excuse those actions, but if you can understand how they got to be that way and why they do the things they do, you may be able to find ways to curb that and gently drift it into a better direction, especially if you're doing the individual introspection of looking at, let's just find more eyes to alliterate.
Everyone who plays Scrabble is going to get real excited.
We got a whole new audience for this show. Okay, let's pause on that because I could talk about this stuff for hours, but I have a couple of other questions that are more what does Rachel think? And one of them is what do you think what is the best exhibit at the Houston Museum of Natural Science?
You know the answer to this already. It's the Hall of Ancient Egypt. You should. Okay, so of course you decided to talk about my favorite thing in the world, which is the Houston Museum of Natural Science. It is a great place to go if you're ever in Houston. You absolutely have to visit it. I was a docent there for a couple of years previous to Harvey, and then Harvey made a mess of everything for a while. But one of the halls was the Hall of Ancient Egyptian. I think it's the Hall of Ancient Egypt was the specific name. They just redid it, and I'm trying to remember if they have reopened it or not. But it was styled after the Temple of Karnak, and so, to scale. So the pillars that they had in it were like one fraction of the scale of what you would have had in the Temple of Karnak and things like that. And then they also sort of separated it so that you walked into the exhibit and it was sort of daily life. And then you turned a corner and then you were into the religious and priestly realms. And then you walked into the afterlife. Very cool exhibit.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah. And my favorite thing in the whole museum was in this exhibit, and I'm sure they're going to bring it back out again. Well, two things. One was a 4,000-year-old necklace made of leaves. So it was dried leaves, a little, almost just like a real short, like a 12-inch strand of little, tiny little leaves, but they were skeletal at this point, but they had been preserved for 4,000 years and had been laid on a mummy.
Right.
And that's how they had it was a mummy dressing. And so, and I just thought that was so interesting that you could sit there and be inches away from a leaf that has existed for 4,000 years.
Right.
And then the other thing was that there were mummified animals, one of which was a cat, because these were sort of good luck charms in the afterlife. And pretty much anything that you had in your tomb in the afterlife, in the spirit realm, became a real thing. And cats were always great to have because they would eat bugs and protect your grain. Only the priests were running a racket, like a legit cat racket, because when they x-rayed the cat mummy, which I'm using in quotes, which if you're listening you can't see, to find that it was a cow bone.
No.
And or they were using bones of other animals and selling them to people saying this is a mummified cat. So yes, there was some sort of deception going on there.
How angry would you be if you wake up in the afterlife and your cat is like, well, I mean, I guess if it comes back, it would be a steak. So maybe that's not so bad.
Well, but if you really are so it's called Hika. That magic is specifically called Hika. And Hika magic is this idea that anything that exists in imagery also exists in reality. Right. So the question is, does that, let's, for the sake of argument, let's say it was a squirrel, just for, American brains.
Oh, yeah.
So we have, like, if somebody said, this is a mummified cat, and this mummified cat is going to protect your sack of nuts. I just realized that what I was going to say. I was like, okay, this cat is going to, it's going to eat bugs, chase away rats. It's going to protect your stash of food.
Right.
Does that, because that is the intention placed on this mummified cat in the afterlife, does it become the cat? Or does it become the nature of what it was, which was a squirrel, and devour all your nuts?
And
I don't know.
And if it was a squirrel that becomes a cat, is it going to be pissed or is it going to be happy?
I don't know.
Maybe that's why some cats have that personality, like where they're just so mad because they used to be a squirrel and now they're like,
perhaps. And they're like,
they just have this beautiful tail.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, no, but that's a real. I mean, I think that touches on something that is a very real concern in a lot of circles, really, because is reality driven by what you believe to be true, or is your belief ultimately driven by and overridden by the reality of the nature of reality, I guess I should say. That's a pretty big question, and I think even some of the people who have really done very scientific psychological work don't necessarily have a good answer for that. Like, they would say that, reality is reality, whether you believe in it or not. But what you believe to be reality may not be, like, what everybody believes to be reality may not be quite what we think it is. Like, it's
well, it's curious. There are two things that this reminds me of. The first one, it reminds me of a psychological thing where you remember the future. Mm-hmm. If you remember the future, meaning that if you want to achieve something, you want to achieve some goal, or you have some sort of vision of where you want to be, you treat it like a memory.
Right.
And so let's say I want a certain job. I want to go be a journalist. Well, I now imagine myself as this journalist, and I am doing it as if I am remembering the thing. And they say by doing that, and even going so far as pushing like crazy, crazy, crazy limits, it sort of brings it into reality, like, because it feels accessible at that point. And so if there is something that you want to achieve that you feel like is too tough or you feel is impossible, if you treat it like a memory, it then becomes accessible. and then you can kind of find your way towards it. So that's one situation where I think, do you create your reality? Just, what is the relationship between that? And then the other one is really spooky. And I don't have the answer to this one. So we're going to get around the campfire for a second and tell a ghost story. Have you ever heard of the Slender Man?
I have heard of the Slender Man. Yeah, I had a teenage daughter during that time. So, yeah.
Yes. So that is the only thing that I find incredibly spooky. So the Slender Man started out as a prank, as a hoax, as people taking pictures. And it was just like, ooh, here's spooky Slender Man. And I don't know if it's real. I am still like, any skeptic would be like, this is a bunch of BS, Rachel. Why are you even concerned about this? And I'm like, I've been around magical circles enough. I don't know. But then this thing sort of manifested into the world. Like that there were these incidences of spotting the Slender Man or having the Slender Man show up in these photographs that supposedly had nothing to do with pranks or hoaxes. Jury's out for me. Yeah. I could see it going either way. I could see people trying to continue the hoax, but like if we say for the sake of argument that it is sort of in the world, well, then what came first? Right. People are the Slender Man, right? You know?
Yeah. Well, and then, I mean, you can take that right back to all the way back to like UFOs. Okay, so why is it that before a certain period of time there weren't any UFOs, and then suddenly everybody's seeing UFOs right and left, except for me, gets to see UFOs right and left? And is that because people, is that because people had just started to write these books about rockets and spacemen, and people started to believe it?
Well, people talked about that being atomic anxiety,
right?
Like an expression of atomic anxiety. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, how much of that is? I mean, okay, look, brains are not truth detectors. Brains are survival engines, and that the implications of that are huge, because that means that I mean, we already know that our eyes can be fooled by optical illusions. We already know that we can have things that we hear. I mean, we're talking over an electronic medium, and the voice that I hear is not your voice. It is a replica that's been made by electrons and speakers and piezoelectric devices that I can't even think about.
Right.
And then you have, Donald Hoffman, who's sort of owning this idea, but it goes back a lot further than him, that what we think of as reality, what we all sort of agree on as reality, is not even remotely close to what's actually real. That basically, to put my own sort of spin on it, basically what we see, what we feel and think of as reality is like the desktop on a computer. It has nothing to do with the internal workings of the computer. It's just an interface that lets us do useful things. If we had to manipulate electrons and stuff on a hard drive, that would be tedious and impossible. But because we have this nice interface, we can do useful things with it. But it has nothing to do with reality as such. And, I think that goes back to long before even like Kant and people like that. But Hoffman makes a good case for it, that, not only is reality not what we see, but that if we could see reality as it is, it would probably kill us. Like, it's probably not something that's in our best interest to see. Not
because the Matrix is real. Right. Yes.
Not necessarily because Cthulhu is hiding in every shadow, but because we just couldn't deal with that in an effective way to live.
Well, this is this idea, like I was reading this thing, like if your brain didn't have some of these rote operations, as in, my brain will recognize a table. if my brain every time had to translate, what do all of those electrons mean? And what does it mean that there is this thing right here? And, oh, that is a table. That there is this grouping. I saw a great model of it where there were ball bearings and on a mountain peak. Think of a 3D model of a mountain range. And there were ball bearings that were set up on the tops of these mountains, and that your brain sort of worked like the valleys, these balls going into the valleys. So like you would have, this is why they haven't been able to, or at least not yet, create these super AI computers, because their brains function in patterning in this way that sort of takes these random balls rolling down into a valley and then makes an assumption. So everything around us is that you're talking about, everything that we see, everything that we interact with is a brain's assumption of what something is. And that's kind of spooky when you think about it.
Yeah, we actually talked about how many computers it would take on our other podcast. We talked about how many computers it would take to simulate one human brain, and we're not there yet.
Thank goodness, too, because we're screwed the minute they figure this out.
Well, that's what they always say is, do we actually want human level intelligence?
I do not need this in my life. I don't need this. Because you understand, we're going to end up the cats.
Right.
We will end up we will have these computer masters, and they will feed us catnip and 3 times a day and give us some toys, and we'll think life is really great and lay down by the fire and not know that anything else is going on in the world. Ugh, terrifying.
As long as that's the cat life that I get out of this deal. I
at least pick the good side of it, right?
So you have cats, right?
I have 2. That's all the cat metaphors and examples, I suppose.
Well,
yeah, sorry.
So, do you think that, and this does kind of loop back around again? Do you think that cats have a different experience of reality than people do? Now, I don't just mean like that their hearing and sight is on different wavelengths, because that's a given. But do you think that they experience a different reality than we do beyond that? Just the physical difference.
It's hard to say. I will have to admit, though, that I did not have my first pet until I was almost 40. So I didn't have pets growing up. I never had a cat, never had a dog. And so my first cat, which I still have, he is a darling, this was my first experience with animals, and that sort of animals have personalities. And I did not fully appreciate or understand that. Like, if you have never had a pet in your life, then this is a really unique experience, because I was both terrified, but it was sort of wondrous to realize that there are attitudes and opinions, and it's sort of like, I can never eat another animal again. Like, it's just not going to, clearly there is some sort of experience that they're having that I didn't have any empathy before I had a pet. I didn't even have any understanding of that. But now that I have 2 cats, oh yes, they have personalities. Oh yes, because they are very different personalities, and there is some spark there. I don't know if the spark is at all similar to the human experience. Like, I don't know if a cat realizes that they're a cat, in that whole I think therefore I am kind of the idea of sentience is knowing that you exist in that sort of meta way. I have no idea if a cat understands that.
Right.
But a cat is also just not a collection of instinct either. There is something in between.
Right.
That allows them to form opinions and to be thoughtful and to have feelings. Like, I remember I stubbed the hell out of my foot at one point, and the cats came up clearly very worried.
Right.
That something had happened, and we're like kind of perched up on the couch, and we're sort of doing their little mewing, like, is everything okay? Well, they had to recognize that I had hurt myself somehow, or that I was in distress somehow. So there's another level of thinking there that, again, I would have never had any appreciation for them until I had pets of my own. I don't know if that answered your question.
It answered a question. There are no.
He's never letting me come back on this show.
There are no right or wrong answers. You mentioned cats being in the in what I think the technical term in archaeology is grave goods of the Egyptians, and I recently saw an interesting article about that was, I think, Monique Skidmore, I think, was the writer, said that cats were in ancient Egypt. Cats were not worshipped as gods themselves, but were vessels that the gods might choose to inhabit. And that kind of, so I was, I'm interested in cats, and I'm interested in what people believe and think, but the more that stuck with me was thinking about it in terms of, okay, so cats, what about dogs, people? Maybe that they're, it's not so much that we should pay attention to them because they are gods themselves, but because these are vessels that the divine may choose to inhabit from time to time, or that may have some like you said, a spark of something special and valuable. Whether that's a person or a tree or talking about the will versus the balance and the harmony. Read last year, I guess it was, Robin Wall Kimmerer's Braiding Sweetgrass, which I highly recommend. Where she taught, she's of Native American descent and has some strong opinions about some things there that I totally agree with in general. One of which is that, reciprocity, where everything that you do, everything that you take in is the gift of another life. Even if it's a fruit, that is a potential life that you're taking, and not only we owe the world around us not only gratitude for that, but an element of reciprocity of giving something back. If not for because we care about the tree, then at least because we care about ourselves, or vice versa. Because that's how this cycle of life continues.
I just think it's important, I guess, if we're looking for like a TLDR or summation idea, it's that it's not just us with a bunch of stuff that was made for us around. Like, it's not like we are humans and we are the top of the food chain and everything that is on this earth is for our taking. I don't agree with that whatsoever. I think that we are not so unlike our cats, and just that whether it was an AI controlling us, I guess, or whether it's, like at some point we may not be the top of the food chain. Let's hope that doesn't happen, because that would be a very scary time. Speaking of aliens, but we have to learn how to live with everything, and we have to learn how to work in harmony. Whether we believe in individual spirits in trees, or the energy of trees, or the nature of trees. Obviously, I am a big believer in climate change and believe that we have to do everything we can to reverse the effects and be grateful for everything that we have. And so, yeah, I mean, I agree with your friend or whoever you were reading, because, yeah, absolutely. And I think that when you talk about magic, I think it also forms a greater appreciation for that when you start to see how well, when you start to see the relationship between you and everything else around you, and that you, on one hand, can feel very small. And I can understand why people are sort of hesitant to really think about their own smallness, because there's just so much in the world that makes us feel small already. Like societally speaking, culturally speaking, we can all feel terribly, terribly, terribly small. And so to sort of think about yourself in the cosmic sense, or, it's like, great, now I'm going to make myself a grain of sand. Mm-hmm. But in the end, we kind of are a grain of sand, and we have to accept that we are part of the ecosystem around us, whether that is physically or, magically or intentionally or intuitively, because our moods also affect the people around us and our animals.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think, I think about that too. I look at, the night sky, and I see these same stars that people have been looking up at for hundreds of thousands of years or more, and feel the weight of how vast that is, and then think, how great of a, I'm not one for miracles, but how great of a miracle is it that there is a something that's looking out at those stars and thinking about how vast they are. And, I would like to believe that there are hopefully benevolent aliens out there somewhere. But how much more of a motivation and how much more of a miraculous situation is it if there's not? If it's just us, how much more weight does that put on, these little decisions that we make, and
the things that we do and the things that we accomplish?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If that's,
we are either the only one or we're not, and either of those ideas are mind-blowing.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. That's so. Yeah. To quote a less intelligentsia type of a reference, I like the quote from John Dies at the End, where he says, at a very real and tangible moment in the future, you're going to die. At that moment, you're either going to cease to exist, or you're going to step into something that's beyond imagination. But either way, at a very real moment in the future, you're going to step into the unknown. And
you're going to find out eventually.
Yeah.
You're going to find out.
And either way, it's something beyond our ability to imagine today.
Yeah.
And you can look at that as being something to be terrified of, or you can look at that as something like, what a miracle it is, what an amazing thing it is to be here, to be able to have conversations about these things, to be able to talk on a computer with video. It's insane.
Yeah.
We have such a crazy, wonderful thing going here that.
Well, that's I like, part of me never wants to leave it. This is where you start to get back to my vampire podcast. Like, there's a reason why I'm into vampires, folks. And it's this idea, there's a lot of neat stuff, and I want to be part of it. Yeah. And I think that if I'm being really, really candid, it was a lot of my own fears of what that end is that started me on looking at religion and spirituality and investigating these things, because I really wanted to know that there's something else. I still want to know that there's something else. The verdict is still out with me.
Right.
It depends on the day. Sometimes I think, oh, there's totally an afterlife. And the other days I'm like, nah, it's just us. Enjoy it while you got it. Like, it's just, it depends. But I think it also really, that was definitely one of the things that kind of set me on the path to looking into all of this stuff.
So it's fascinating to me that it seems like we both have had, or maybe just it's a core part of personality of there are things that I would like to believe, but I want to know. Like, I don't want to just take it as a given, on authority. And that has led me.
Yeah, that's why I didn't make a very good Christian.
Well, that's what I was going to say. So that led me to a place where I approach things from this very, sort of scientific, researchy kind of approach. But yet I still have these beliefs that are very metaphysical and so on. And you're a magician and a witch who also takes things in a very grounded and realistic way. It's just fascinating.
Yeah.
There's this, two different people with sort of similar, needs to see beyond what is just placed in front of you.
Faith is not enough for me. Faith is, I can't take something on faith. Or like there has to be some sort of something behind that. And so that's why I said I didn't make a very good Christian, because it's sort of like, well, you have to have faith. Like, it's all about faith. And I'm like, well, I'm out, because I can't,
Faith is not.
Because I'm never going to be able to get around that. I'm never going to be able to get around the idea, even if it's just empirical evidence in the sense of, like, I did a thing and this was a result and I saw it enough that it is a pattern that I can't explain it.
Yeah.
But at least for me, this is the thing that happens. And that's how I kind of ended up leaning more on the magical side of stuff, because whether you consider magic a extra force outside of us, mm-hmm. changing things, moving things, whether it's its own element that you're kind of messing with, or if it is just simply my intention and simply my direct energy, or me wanting to call something magic, but it is completely in the capacity of every human person to do if they just sort of focus themselves in the proper way. You have these things that are repeated things that happen, that I have seen enough in the number of years that I've been doing this, that if I do these 3 or 4 things to get, in my particular case, a few extra dollars, sorry, don't judge me. There's random stuff that happens. Like, mm-hmm. my husband ended up getting a check from Blockbuster, right, that he used to work at 15 years ago when I did one of these things. So, like, there's this, and maybe it's just one of these things where it's kind of confirmation bias in the sense that it's like you are looking for avenues to get a little extra scratch, before payday. And so you do a little wooge, and now you're looking at what that is. And when you look at what that is, then you end up finding the thing, and giving meaning back to this original ritual that you did. That might be the case. Either way, though, I'm good with that. I think I'm totally fine with that.
But if you do something, whether it's a ritual, whether it's a magical ritual, we're doing more air quotes for those listening, whether it's a magical ritual, or it's a self-help book, or if you do
a prayer
a prayer that puts you in the mindset to see an opportunity that you would have not otherwise seen, is that not
exactly
magical and miraculous in and of itself? However you want to define the forces that came into play to put you in the way of that. I mean,
exactly. That's
the great
that's sort of my,
is that it doesn't matter whether you call it magic or you call it God's will, or you call it, the cat's will, which is probably the most important thing in my house.
That's all that we care about here, right?
Yeah. The fact that it has the things that you do, and I think the action has a big impact on it. If you're not doing the thing, if you're not doing the work, whatever the work looks like, that's where the power comes from. Like, it's not enough
Absolutely.
To sit back and pray to God, but row towards the beach.
Yes.
Um,
What was that? Wasn't there that one story of you're drowning out in a lake,
oh yeah,
and you're
right.
praying to God, and you're like, help me, God. And so then somebody comes by with a boat and says, hey, would you like to get in the boat? And you're like, no, God's going to help me.
Right.
I just got to keep praying to God. And then God sends a helicopter with a rope.
Right.
And they're like, nope, God's got me on here. You know, it's
Right.
sort of like,
Yeah.
get in the boat.
Just
Grab the rope, please.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is like, we have all these opportunities to change the world, to make the world a better place, to make somebody's life a little bit better today. Whether that's in the form of some huge thing that impacts climate change globally, or whether that's just, smiling when it looks like the cashier at the gas station is having a bad day. Those things have tremendous power in the world, whatever you want to call that power. And we have an opportunity to make the world a better place every single day. And it doesn't matter what you call it. It doesn't matter how you structure it. It's the doing of the thing. It's the doing of the work that is what brings the power into reality.
I agree. I think what we have done is we have talked over 2 hours, over 2 different sessions, something like that, to find out that you and I are the same person and that we agree.
Yeah, we definitely agree. Yeah, I would be sorry for your spouse and family if you are the same person as me, but.
I would say I'd be sorry for yours.
But the cats would be happy. So, no, I think we agree. I think we probably have some kindred spirit stuff there on a lot of things. But it's fascinating topics, and you're right. We have gone way over the time that you agreed to give me, and I appreciate it very much, especially with the.
I've loved every minute of it. No, I'm happy. I'm happy to have had the conversation. Absolutely.
But let's go ahead and we'll wrap it up with. You've got a podcast again, and that is Lifemancy, which is
yes, Lifemancy.
If you have any interest at all in things occult or supernatural, in fact, I would even go so far as to say if your interest is just sort of there and you want to get an idea of what it's really about versus the crazy stuff that you see in movies and stuff, it's a great place to start.
Yeah.
It's a very soft intro. but also
it is a friendly skeptic skeptic friendly zone.
Skeptic friendly
for
zone.
sure.
That's thank you. That's a good way to put it. And also and I think this is the new really cool thing that will be out by the time this goes live is
I know
in the world of Vampire the Masquerade Court Saga, I am not something I would normally do, but the previews sounded so good. Tremendous.
I've got you hooked from a preview.
Yeah,
I love it.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this sounds to me way better than a lot of the serial fiction that's available on podcasts, and
it's a vampire murder mystery.
Vampire murder.
So
that's already
yes, a vampire's maker, sire, whatever you want to call him, has been killed, and he goes back to his vampire hometown to find out, for the funeral, and finds out that his old friend is the murderer. And it starts from there.
Right.
So
if the fact
if you like murder mysteries and you like vampires,
if the fact that there's a vampire funeral involved does not get you interested.
That's the greatest irony of all, isn't it? That the scene opens with the vampires attending a funeral for a corpse that went corpse times 2. I don't know.
Yeah. So Lifemancy is available on all fine purveyors of podcasts.
Yes, any place that you get your podcast, you will find
And
Lifemancy, and that is about magic, the occult, metaphysics, history, science, all of that stuff, nonfiction.
Right.
And then Vampire the Masquerade, Port Saga, Vampire Murder Mystery, totally fiction, using the same universe as Vampire the Masquerade. So if you that's been around since the 90s. So if you've ever heard of Vampire the Masquerade, check it out. I think it's going to be good. Also, if you like soap operas, also going to be good.
Right, yes. Yeah.
Yes, it's very soapy.
and that's also on the same platforms that's available.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
You can find me anywhere.
Yeah. Any other links or social or anything that you want to?
Nope. If you go to racheljwilkinson.com, you're going to find all of that. So if you just go racheljwilkinson.com, you will find Port Saga, you'll find Lifemancy, you will find all the RPG books that I've written on. So, yeah.
Very, very interesting stuff there, too. Well, no.
Very interesting, yes.
Well, no, when you stumble across something and say, oh, I think I know who that is. That's I think I remember that. That's actually kind of cool. But,
for sure.
But yeah, so this has been great, and appreciate it again the time that you put in getting this going. I appreciate you introducing me.
Happy to
Riverside. Shout out to Riverside.
Thank you for having me. I have been thoroughly pleased with our whole conversation. I apologize for all of the random digressions, but this is what it is, having a conversation with me.
Yeah.
So.
Well, this show is all about random digressions. That's what it is. So
that I'm in the right place.
So I do feel like I've been educated on a little bit of a little taste of what the occult is all about these days, and there's so much more.
And there's
so much more, yeah.